Yesterday's hearings on Capitol Hill with former Twitter executives explaining their decision to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story was incredibly revealing. More revealing, I think, that those former Twitter executives intended. We talked about this a little bit last night, but we've been able to really examine some of this testimony, and it appears these guys might be in some legal trouble. Let's bring on Hans von Spakovsky. He's a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, used to work for the Justice Department, expertise in election law. Hans, thanks for joining us on this.
Sure, thanks for having me on.
Well, I don't break this down, but it's sort of an overall question here, because a lot of this has to do with censorship, it has to do with First Amendment rights, it has to do with civil rights. But there's also an election element to this, considering the article that was censored by Twitter from the New York Post directly related to the 2020 presidential election. This could be called election tampering, couldn't it, Hans?
Well, it could, and there's potential problems with the FEC, that's the Federal Election Commission. You know, that's the agency that enforces the laws about raising and spending of money for federal campaigns. And there was a complaint filed against Twitter over what it did with regard to that article in the New York Post, claiming that it was directly intervening to help the Biden campaign. So that brings up a federal law issue involving federal campaign finance laws.
And just to be clear, so everybody understands why that's a FEC issue and campaign finance, this would basically be seen as an extraordinary in-kind contribution to the Biden campaign, right?
Right, and corporations are completely banned from in any way participating in American elections in terms of financial contributions to campaigns, or what are called in-kind contributions. You know, you get in trouble even if you don't give cash to a campaign. If you give them some kind of services that are of value to them, that's also against the law.
And that's why they spent a little bit of time in the committee hearing yesterday talking about the public records that show the extraordinary number, the percentage of Twitter employees who donate to Democrat candidates versus, I think there's one employee over there that donated like $400 to Trump. And also Yoel Roth. Now, Yoel Roth was the executive who was in charge of making the final decision about censoring this story. And he has a long history of statements that were incredibly, let's be generous, very critical of Donald Trump. And he made these statements publicly on social media. So there's no doubt that Yoel Roth was personally on Team Biden versus Team Trump. And that's why it's legitimate to call into question what he did with the power he had at Twitter, right?
Well, that's correct. And in particular, remember, a complaint was filed with the FEC. They investigated, they dismissed it, but the dismissal was based on the fact that back then, Twitter claimed that they in no way were working with or coordinating with the Biden campaign, and that second, the only reason that this New York Post article had basically been banned on Twitter was they were following their standard business procedures and rules on not publishing hacked materials. We, of course, know that's not true.
Right. In fact, Yoel Roth himself, when he first saw this story, said, well, this doesn't violate our policies. This isn't hacked materials. Let's go to what Yoel Roth, this executive at Twitter, through his attorneys, the statement that he made to the FEC. We have the critical part of it. Let's bring it up here. Since 2018, I've had regular meetings with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and industry peers regarding election security. During these weekly meetings, the federal law enforcement agencies communicated that they expected hack and leak operations by state actors might occur in the period shortly before the 2020 presidential election, likely in October. And then the statement continues, I was told in these meetings that the intelligence community expected that individuals associated with political campaigns would be subject to hacking attacks, and the material obtained through those hacking attacks would likely be disseminated over social media platforms, including Twitter. I also learned in these meetings that there were rumors that a hack and leak operation would involve Hunter Biden. So Hans, there's this guy, Yoel Roth, basically saying, hey, what were we supposed to do? The FBI warned us it was coming, and then here comes the story, and the FBI told us, so we had to take it down. He was saying, we were just operating under instructions from the FBI, right?
Well, that's what he's saying, but it was pretty clear from that New York Post article that these were not hacked materials. And I think the Twitter disclosures have shown internal emails where, in fact, he and others insiders saying, well, it turns out these really aren't hacked materials.
Right.
And there's no reason for us to be banning this.
Well, and yesterday under oath, he was specifically asked about that statement, and look at what he said.
I want to be clear that my statement to the FEC does not suggest that the FBI told me it would involve Hunter Biden. That's a popular reading of that declaration, but it was not my intent. I think there is a coincidence there, and I really can't speak as to how that came about.
Wow. I mean, because here's the thing, Hans. He either lied to the FEC or he just lied under oath to a congressional committee, but they can't both be true.
No, they can't both be true, and in either case, he's in potential trouble. In fact, not only should the FEC reopen the complaint against Twitter, they should consider whether a criminal referral to the Justice Department is required if he lied to the FEC.
All right, and then there's this. Jim Baker, who had been an attorney with the FBI during the Russian collusion hoax that he was a big part of, he leaves he leaves the FBI, goes to work for Twitter just in time for the 2020 election. He was asked yesterday by Congressman Jim Jordan whether he had talked to the FBI about the Hunter Biden story. And listen to how evasive he is. Watch this video.
Mr. Baker, you said you didn't talk with the FBI that day. Did you talk to the FBI about the Hunter Biden laptop story prior to then or after that day?
I'm trying to make sure I can answer this question consistent with the restrictions that I talked about in my opening
Simple
statement.
question. Did you
Yes.
talk to the FBI about the Hunter Biden story?
To the best of my recollection, I did not talk to the FBI about the Hunter Biden story before that day.
Did you talk to him after it? You said your
don't
response
recall.
your response is real specific to the chairman. You said, I did not talk to the FBI about the Hunter Biden laptop story that day. I assume that day is October 14th. I want to know if you talked to him on the 13th or before, or if you talked to him on the 15th and after.
I don't recall speaking to the FBI. Sitting here today, I don't recall speaking to the FBI at all about the Hunter Biden matter.
My goodness,
Well, then why'd you
that's some lawyerly, weaselly language there. But here's what the record shows. Here's the email sent by Jim Baker to his Twitter colleagues. Take a look, where he specifically says, guys, this has all the earmarks of Russian disinformation. Of course, he's using his authority as a former FBI lawyer, and he's the one who said, we've got to censor this story. Hans, this seems pretty clear. What happened here, what went on, how is this not meddling in the 2020 election?
Oh, no, I think it was. And if that's an example of his skills at the FBI, it's no wonder we're all in trouble. Because again, it was very clear from the very first that this was not Russian disinformation. It was a laptop that Hunter Biden had abandoned with a computer repairman. And there was no evidence whatsoever that this was a Russian plant or anything like that. They just used that as a convenient excuse for not publishing what could have been information that affected the way people voted in that election.
Yeah, and let's add to that, by the way, the laptop was turned over to the FBI in December of 2019. Right. This story came down October of 2020, so the FBI knew very well what the source material was. We're going to have to leave it there, Hans, but something's rotten here. Something smells real bad, and there was definitely some kind of tampering there at the corporate level from Twitter in the 2020 election. There's more to come on O'Connor tonight. You are watching Salem News Channel.